who's as adamant about his or her position as I am about mine, whom you think is sharp. Seriously, we know that. And another thing, we heard him say that... Welcome to another edition of And Another Thing. I am your humble host, Larry Elder, the sage from South Central, the Prince of Pico Union, the Czar of Common Sense. And I welcome all of your questions. Please send them to LarryElder.com. And every week, as you know, we do another edition of And Another Thing. This, by the way, is episode number 13. And I've got some questions from all over the country, all over the galaxy. I don't want to limit anybody. We'll be doing that in just a second. But I have a couple of things I want to say first. The first is I want to talk a little bit about the housing meltdown / Wall Street meltdown / financial crash, because it's very important to really understand what happened. And it's not a complicated story unless you want to make it complicated. Ultimately, what happened is, as my friend Tom Sowell says when I interviewed him about this, people stopped paying their mortgages. Why did so many people stop paying their mortgages? Because a lot of people were buying homes that they couldn't afford, shouldn't have afforded, should never have had them. Why were they getting loans? They were getting loans because banks were pressured by government to lend money to so-called underrepresented borrowers. That's a fancy way of saying black and brown borrowers who disproportionately do not own their own homes. The Democrats under Jimmy Carter first and then under Bill Clinton felt that this is something government ought to be doing, and they passed something called the Community Reinvestment Act. And under Jimmy Carter, it was given teeth under Bill Clinton. By teeth, I mean this. Banks were told, look, we're going to give you a community reinvestment score, a CRA score, and that score has to do with the extent to which you've lent money to people that we deem to be in this class of underrepresented borrowers. If you don't have a high enough score, don't think about getting your merger granted. Don't think about getting a permission to put in ATMs in certain places. We're going to hold you up. And so banks were literally given business reasons to make these kinds of loans. And secondly, the reason they were able to do them so readily without fighting so much is because the government implicitly, under Freddie and Fannie, the two government agencies that back more than half of all these mortgages, and now back more than 3/4 of all mortgages in the country, had said to anybody who wants to buy these instruments after they're bundled and packaged, which they did on Wall Street, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, the federal government will come in the event that the people who own these homes, which are the basis of these bonds, don't pay their mortgages, we'll come in, we'll make you whole. And so all the borrowers were assured that the federal government was going to come in, the American federal government was going to come in and make these loans hold in the event that the underlying borrowers defaulted. And so Wall Street felt they were playing with somebody else's money. They wouldn't have made the decisions that they made had they been playing with their own money. So the whole thing was government driven. If government doesn't have a Freddie and a Fannie, if government doesn't have a Community Reinvestment Act, and by the way, our neighbors up north, Canada, they don't have these things. They didn't have a housing meltdown. There's no such thing as underrepresented borrowers up in Canada. There's no feeling that mom, apple pie, baseball, and owning a home are things that you should strive as a human being. They don't feel that way at all. So as a matter of fact, they didn't have the kind of meltdown that we did. So the bottom line is it was government driven. Government caused it. Government decided that we're going to get in the housing business. Freddie and Fannie are entities government never should have set up. The Community Reinvestment Act never should have been passed. And by the way, Freddie and Fannie are still on the books. We still are giving underrepresented borrowers loans via the Federal Housing Administration, FHA loans. Federal government is still involved in this. So we haven't learned anything. And Frank Dodd did nothing at all to get rid of community. Why does it seem that Republicans and Libertarians tend to be close on a lot of issues, and then when it comes to social issues, for example, they can be so far apart? Can you break it down for me, all the differences? It's an interesting conundrum, isn't it? Because for a lot of Libertarians, Republicans are sellouts. Republicans, to a lot of Libertarians, are the equivalent of what the NRA is to the Gun Owners of America. NRA is a group that's headed up by David Keene and by who's the guy who's the president of the NRA? I'll think of his name in a second. Wayne LaPierre, thank you. Wayne LaPierre. I interviewed Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America for my documentary, Michael and Me, which, by the way, is available on my website, LarryElder.com, a free copy of Michael and Me for all new Eldorados. Notice how I got that plug-in. Larry Pratt is not in favor of background checks for anybody. Thinks anybody should be able to carry a firearm, even a convicted felon, because convicted felons have served their time and they deserve to defend themselves as well too. Maybe even are in greater need of a gun, according to Larry Pratt. I'm just saying that the NRA thinks of those guys as wimps. Libertarians think of Republicans as wimps. For example, libertarians, Republicans are in lockstep to the extent that Republicans, at least on paper, believe that government should be smaller. I say on paper because even Ronald Reagan failed in shrinking the size of government. He slowed down the rate of domestic spending. Now, this is the episode number 13. Send in your questions and another thing, I'm happy to take them from all over the country. Again, all new Eldorados get a free copy of my DVD, Michael and Me. It's a movie-length DVD where we try to track down the esteemed director, Michael Moore, and ask him how often Americans use guns to defend themselves. And I was able to track him down. I hope you enjoyed this small excerpt. If you want to see the full video, got to be in El Dorado. Go to my website, larryelder.com, log in, fill out the form. It'll cost you about $4.75 a month, or about the price of a mocha frappuccino latte at your favorite coffee house. As you can tell, I don't like coffee. I'm a tea drinker. See you next time.